The demand for divorce. Emma Carter awoke in the sprawling Carter estate, a gilded prison that reflected the hollowness of her life. The mansion's cold, polished surfaces and cavernous silence mirrored the absence of love in her marriage. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting sharp shadows that only emphasized how out of place Emma felt in this house. She moved through the echoing halls, her bare feet silent on the marble floors. Her fingers brushed the smooth surface of a framed photograph on the mantel, a picture of her and Ethan on their wedding day. In the image, they smiled brightly, Ethan's arm possessively around her waist. Emma's heart ached as she recalled the days when their love seemed genuine, before the lies and betrayals. Ethan entered the dining room late, as usual. He was freshly showered, his dark hair slicked back, and his phone already glued to his hand. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, but Emma felt no warmth in the room. Ethan muttered a half-hearted morning without looking up, his thumbs furiously typing a message. Emma's gaze lingered on him, her resolve hardening. "I want a divorce," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. Ethan's fingers froze mid-type, and for a moment he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he threw his head back and laughed, a cruel, booming sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "Emma, don't be ridiculous," he said, shaking his head. "What are you going to do? Live off your non-existent skills? Nobody will want you. Be realistic." His words stung, but Emma held her ground. She looked him straight in the eye, her hazel gaze steady. "This isn't a discussion, Ethan. I'm done." Ethan's laughter faded, replaced by a cold smirk. "Done? With what?" "Your little fantasy of being independent." He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Let me tell you something, Emma. You won't last a day without me." Emma didn't respond. She stood, smoothing the front of her blouse, and left the room. She didn't need to convince him. Her actions would speak louder than words. Later that day, Emma met Sophia Morgan at a cozy cafe downtown. The familiar scent of roasted coffee beans and the hum of conversation provided a brief escape from the tension at home. Sophia, with her vibrant energy and fierce confidence, was the only person who knew the truth about Emma's secret life. "You actually told him?" Sophia asked, her green eyes wide with surprise. Emma nodded, her fingers curling around the warm mug in her hands. "I couldn't take it anymore. The way he looked at me like I was some useless ornament. I had to say something." Sophia leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "Good, but you need to be ready for what's next. Ethan's not the kind of man who lets go easily." "I know," Emma replied, "but I'm not the same woman he thinks I am." They spent the next hour strategizing. Sophia, a successful lawyer, outlined the legal steps Emma needed to take. "And remember," Sophia added, "you've got that ace up your sleeve. Don't reveal it too soon. Timing is everything." Returning to the Carter estate that evening, Emma felt a mix of fear and determination. Ethan acted as though nothing had happened, his dismissive attitude infuriating but unsurprising. Emma pretended to go along with the charade, but as night fell, she began preparing for the battle ahead. In the quiet of their bedroom, as Ethan snored softly, Emma opened a hidden compartment in her closet. Inside were neatly organized files, the evidence of her secret empire, documents, account statements, and business plans. She flipped through them, her confidence growing with every page. She paused when she came across an old journal, its cover worn and familiar. Opening it, she found a photo tucked between the pages, a younger Emma, smiling beside her late Aunt Margaret. It was Margaret's unexpected inheritance that had given Emma the means to escape her financial dependence on Ethan. Closing the journal, Emma looked out the window at the city lights in the distance. She thought of the life she wanted, one where she was free to live without fear or humiliation. Her hand tightened around the journal, and she whispered to herself, "Tomorrow it begins." The revelation of the secret. Emma stepped into the law office with her head held high, her heels clicking against the polished floors. The air was thick with tension as she entered the conference room where Ethan sat, flanked by his high-powered lawyer. His posture was relaxed, his smirk infuriatingly smug, as though he were already certain of victory. "Ah, there she is," Ethan said mockingly. "The brave little bird who thinks she can fly away. Let's get this over with, shall we?" Emma ignored him, taking her seat across the table. Beside her, Sophia Morgan exuded confidence, her presence a reminder that Emma was no longer facing this alone. Ethan's lawyer, a gray-haired man with a cold demeanor, began with a rehearsed tone. "Mrs. Carter, I trust you understand the terms your husband is offering. Given your lack of financial contributions to the marriage, It's generous to offer you the house and a modest allowance. Ethan leaned back, his smirk widening. See? I'm being reasonable, Emma. You should take the deal before I change my mind. Sophia didn't miss a beat. Let's not jump to conclusions, Mr. Carter. My client has her own terms to present. Emma opened her folder, revealing neatly prepared documents. She slid them across the table, her movements calm but deliberate. Ethan's smirk faltered as he picked up the papers. What's this? He asked, his tone tinged with suspicion. Proof, Emma said simply, of my financial independence, of the businesses I've built, and of my contributions that you never knew about. Ethan's face darkened as he flipped through the documents. Bank statements, business registration forms, and investment portfolios painted a picture of a woman far more capable than he had ever imagined. His lawyer adjusted his glasses, leaning in to study the papers more closely. This can't be real, Ethan stammered, his arrogance cracking. How did you? Emma met his gaze, her voice steady. Do you remember Aunt Margaret? The woman you dismissed as a harmless eccentric? She left me her entire fortune. I invested it, grew it, and built something of my own, all while you were too busy underestimating me. The silence in the room was deafening. Ethan's lawyer cleared his throat, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Well, this changes things. We'll need time to review. No, Sophia interrupted. There's nothing to review. The evidence is solid. We're here to discuss Emma's terms, not yours. Ethan's composure shattered. He leaned forward, his voice low and furious. You think this changes anything? You're still my wife. You still owe me. I owe you nothing, Emma cut in, her voice sharp. For years, I played the role you expected of me while you lied, cheated, and belittled me. This isn't about revenge, Ethan. This is about reclaiming my life. Ethan fell silent, his face a mask of shock and humiliation. Sophia took over, outlining the demands: an equitable division of assets, no further claims to Emma's businesses, and an immediate end to their marriage. By the time they left the office, the power dynamic between Emma and Ethan had shifted entirely. Ethan, once so confident in his dominance, was now visibly shaken. Later that evening, Emma returned to the Carter estate, her heart lighter but her resolve unshaken. She began packing her belongings, each item a reminder of the life she was leaving behind. In the walk-in closet, she hesitated over a row of designer gowns, symbols of a lifestyle she no longer wanted. She chose instead to pack her simplest clothes, valuing comfort and practicality over appearances. As she zipped up her suitcase, she heard Ethan enter the bedroom. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Emma, he said quietly, we need to talk. She turned to face him, her posture unwavering. There's nothing left to say, Ethan. You made your choices, and I've made mine. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his voice, only desperation. I didn't think you were capable of... Of what? She interrupted. Of living without you? That was your mistake, Ethan. You thought I needed you. But the truth is, you needed me to feel powerful. And now that's over. Ethan reached for her, but she stepped back. Don't, she said firmly. This isn't a negotiation. It's the end. She walked past him, suitcase in hand, leaving the mansion that had once felt like a prison. The night air was cool as she stepped outside, the weight of the past lifting with each step. She glanced back at the Carter estate one last time, not with regret, but with a sense of closure. As she drove away, she felt a surge of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was hers to navigate. Building a new life. Emma woke up in her new apartment, a modest but charming space nestled in the heart of the city. The first rays of sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, painting the walls in soft hues of orange and gold. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. Gone were the towering ceilings and marble floors of the Carter estate. This was her sanctuary, humble but hers alone. She stepped into the small kitchen, where boxes still cluttered the counters. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as she poured herself a cup and stared out of the window. The bustling street below was alive with the energy of morning commuters. Emma smiled, finding comfort in the ordinary chaos of city life. Her day began with a meeting at her downtown office, a sleek space she had kept hidden from Ethan for years. Emma's assistant, Clara, greeted her with enthusiasm, handing her a stack of reports. The latest numbers from our tech investments came in, Clara said, her voice brimming with excitement. The growth is exponential. Your instincts were spot on again. Emma took the reports, scanning the figures. Each success was a reminder of her resilience, of how far she had come despite Ethan's dismissiveness. Great work, Clara. Let's discuss next steps in the afternoon meeting, she replied. The office buzzed with activity as Emma moved through her day. Her team was a diverse group of talented individuals who respected her leadership. Together, they had built something extraordinary, and Emma was determined to take it even further. During her lunch break, Emma met with Sophia at a quaint cafe near the office. Sophia, as always, was a source of warmth and encouragement. "You're glowing," Sophia said, sipping her cappuccino. "I haven't seen you this alive in years." Emma chuckled. "It feels good to finally be free. But there's still so much to do. Ethan won't let go easily, and I need to make sure I'm prepared for whatever he throws at me." "You're stronger than he'll ever give you credit for," Sophia said firmly. "And if he tries anything, you've got me." Their conversation shifted to lighter topics, and for a moment, Emma allowed herself to enjoy the simple pleasure of a meal with a friend. Later that evening, Emma returned to her apartment, determined to turn it into a home. She unpacked boxes, carefully arranging books, photographs, and other personal items. Each piece was a reflection of her true self, free from the constraints of her old life. As she hung a painting on the wall, a gift from her late Aunt Margaret, her thoughts drifted to the woman who had believed in her potential. Margaret had seen something in Emma that no one else had, and it was her faith that had set Emma on this path. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, pulling Emma from her thoughts. It was a message from Ethan. "We need to talk. This isn't over." Emma stared at the screen, her resolve unshaken. She knew Ethan well enough to understand his desperation. Losing control was his greatest fear, and Emma's independence was a direct threat to his ego. Instead of replying, she placed the phone face down and focused on her evening. She was done letting Ethan dictate her emotions. That weekend, Emma decided to reconnect with an old friend, Ryan Dawson. They had grown up together in a small town, but life had taken them in different directions. Ryan was now a successful architect, known for his innovative designs. They met at a quiet park, where the autumn leaves painted the ground in shades of red and gold. Ryan greeted her with a warm smile, his easygoing demeanor instantly putting her at ease. "Emma Carter," he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "It's been years." "Too many," Emma replied, hugging him. They spent hours catching up, sharing stories of their journeys. Emma spoke of her struggles, her triumphs, and her plans for the future. Ryan listened intently, his admiration for her clear. "You've always been strong," he said. "Even back then, I could see it. I'm glad you're finally living for yourself." Emma felt a spark of hope as they parted ways. Ryan's belief in her was a reminder that she wasn't alone, that there were people who saw her for who she truly was. That night, as Emma sat on her balcony, gazing at the city lights, she felt a sense of clarity. Her journey was far from over, but she was no longer afraid. Each step she took was a step toward the life she deserved, a life built on her own terms. The first strike. Weeks passed, and Emma's new life began to take shape. Her business ventures were flourishing, and the sense of freedom she had longed for was slowly becoming a reality. Yet, despite her progress, Ethan's presence loomed like a shadow over her newfound independence. He had not let go of their marriage, and his attempts to regain control were becoming increasingly aggressive. One afternoon, as Emma was reviewing a business proposal in her office, Clara entered with an envelope. "This just came for you," she said, handing Emma the thick packet. Emma tore it open, her heart sinking as she read the contents. It was a cease and desist letter from Ethan's legal team, demanding that she relinquish control of the businesses she had built. The letter was filled with threats and accusations, painting her as a gold digger trying to take what was rightfully his. Ethan's arrogance was on full display, and Emma could practically hear his voice dripping with venom as she read his demands. Clara looked at her with concern. "What are you going to do?" Emma placed the letter down on the desk, her fingers trembling slightly. For a moment, she considered how far Ethan had gone to undermine her. But the thought of giving in was unimaginable. This was the moment she had prepared for, the moment when Ethan would learn just how wrong he was about her. "I'm going to fight back," Emma said, her voice steady and resolute. "I've built this from the ground up, and no one is going to take it from me." That evening, Sophia visited Emma in her apartment to discuss the next steps. "We need to be strategic," Sophia said. "Ethan knows how to play dirty. You have to be prepared for everything." Emma nodded, her mind already racing through the legal steps she would take to counter Ethan's move. But it wasn't just the legal battle she had to worry about. Ethan's pride would never allow him to let go of her, and she knew he would try to manipulate her emotionally to regain control. As if on cue, her phone buzzed. Another message from Ethan. You think you can run away from me? You belong to me, Emma. You always will. Emma read the message, the familiar sting of his words no longer cutting as deeply. She deleted it without hesitation. Ethan's control over her was slipping away, and every message, every threat, only served to remind her of the strength she had gained. Over the next few days, the legal battle intensified. Ethan's team began to dig into Emma's finances, searching for any weakness they could exploit. But Emma's preparations were meticulous. She had anticipated his every move, keeping her finances tight and her business dealings above reproach. Meanwhile, in her personal life, Emma found herself growing closer to Ryan. Their rekindled friendship turned into something deeper. He had always been there for her, but now, their connection was more meaningful. Ryan was the first person who had ever truly seen her as an equal, and his support was a balm to her wounded heart. One evening, after a long day of legal meetings, Emma met Ryan for dinner at a quiet restaurant. The two of them sat across from each other, the flickering candlelight casting soft shadows on their faces. "You're handling this better than I ever could," Ryan said, his voice filled with admiration. Emma smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. "It's not easy, but I have no choice. Ethan underestimated me, and now he'll have to face the consequences." Ryan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You're stronger than you know, Emma, and you're not alone in this." Emma's heart fluttered, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. She couldn't afford to let herself become distracted by anything, not yet. Ethan had yet to show his true cards, and she needed to remain focused. As they finished their meal, Emma received another message from Ethan. But this time it was different. "I'll make you regret this, Emma. You won't win. You'll see." Emma's fingers curled around her phone, but she didn't respond. Instead, she looked at Ryan and smiled, the weight of Ethan's threats beginning to feel less burdensome with each passing day. "I've already won," she said quietly. Later that night, as she lay in bed, Emma thought about the road ahead. The legal battle was just beginning, and Ethan's actions would only escalate. But Emma had something he didn't: true independence, and the courage to stand up for herself. She was no longer the submissive wife who had lived in his shadow. She was Emma Carter, a force to be reckoned with. The battle escalates. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, court filings, and legal threats. Ethan's legal team came at Emma with everything they had, attacking her businesses, questioning her integrity, and even digging into her past. They tried to paint her as a vengeful ex-wife, someone driven by greed and bitterness. But Emma had prepared for this. She knew the tactics Ethan would use. He'd always underestimated her, but that was his fatal mistake. In court, Ethan's lawyer tried to push their narrative, insisting that Emma had no right to the businesses she had built. They claimed that, as his wife, any wealth she accumulated during their marriage belonged to him. But Emma's legal team, led by Sophia, dismantled their arguments piece by piece. "You cannot deny the contributions my client has made, both financially and personally," Sophia argued in front of the judge. "These businesses were created on her own terms, with her own resources, and there is no evidence to suggest otherwise." The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Ethan sat in the front row, his eyes narrowing with each passing moment. Emma could feel his gaze on her, but she refused to look at him. He was losing control, and the realization was eating away at him. The case wasn't moving quickly, but Emma was relentless. Every day, she woke up with a single focus: to ensure her freedom, her businesses, and her future. Her confidence grew with each legal victory, but she knew this was far from over. Ethan would never accept defeat without a fight. One evening, after a long day in court, Emma returned to her apartment, exhausted but determined. She dropped her briefcase by the door and poured herself a glass of wine. The phone buzzed on the counter, and for a moment, she hesitated. It was another message from Ethan. "You've made your point, Emma. But if you think this is over, you're wrong. You can't outrun your past. I'll expose you for who you really are." Emma's hand tightened around the wine glass. She had expected this. Ethan's last resort was always intimidation, trying to unearth secrets that weren't there. But she was no longer afraid of him. His threats meant nothing now. She placed her phone face down and moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. The night was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt a sense of peace wash over her. As she settled into bed that night, her thoughts turned to Ryan. Over the past few weeks, they had become inseparable, their friendship deepening into something more. Ryan had become her rock, offering emotional support when she needed it most. She found herself looking forward to their time together, the quiet moments where she could simply be herself. But even as their connection grew stronger, Emma couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Ethan would stop at nothing to regain control. He hadn't backed down yet, and he wasn't going to. The following day, Emma met with her legal team again. The focus was on strategy, how to counter Ethan's next move. Ethan's team is going to try to make this personal, Sophia said. They're going to dig into your background, your family, anything they can use against you. Emma nodded. Let them. They'll find nothing. Sophia paused, her expression serious. Emma, we need to make sure we have all our bases covered. If they're going to attack your character, we need to hit back harder. I know, Emma replied. I'm ready. Sophia gave her a reassuring smile. You've come this far. Just stay focused. Later that afternoon, Emma received a call from Ryan. He had been out of town for a few days, and they hadn't had the chance to speak much. How are you holding up? Ryan asked. Emma leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. I'm fine. It's just exhausting. Ethan's not making this easy, but I won't back down. I know you won't, Ryan replied. You're stronger than he realizes. Emma smiled at his words. Thank you, Ryan. I don't know what I'd do without you. The call ended on a positive note, but Emma's mind continued to race. The legal battles were only one front in this war. Ethan was playing a long game, trying to break her down emotionally and financially. He had always been good at manipulation, but Emma was no longer the woman who had blindly trusted him. She had learned, and she was ready to fight for everything she had built. That evening, as she prepared for bed, Emma felt a surge of determination. This was no longer just about revenge or defeating Ethan. It was about reclaiming her life, her identity, and her future. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. The unexpected ally. As the legal battle continued to intensify, Emma felt herself becoming more focused and resolute with every passing day. The court dates seemed endless, and the pressure weighed heavily on her, but she refused to back down. She had come too far to let Ethan's attempts to regain control destroy the life she was building. One afternoon, while reviewing some financial records at her office, Emma received a call from an unknown number. She hesitated before answering, unsure of what to expect. Hello, Emma, a voice said on the other end. It was a woman's voice, calm but firm. Yes, who is this? Emma asked, her curiosity piqued. This is Detective Mia Hayes. I've been following your case, the woman said. I have information that might interest you. Emma sat up straight, her heart pounding in her chest. What kind of information? I've been investigating Ethan Carter for some time. He's not just the businessman he appears to be. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes. I believe he's been hiding assets and laundering money for years, Detective Hayes explained. I can help you expose him, but I need your cooperation. Emma's mind raced. She had suspected Ethan's business dealings were not as clean as he made them out to be, but hearing this from a professional investigator was a revelation. She had always known there was more to his empire than he let on, but this was the leverage she needed. I'm listening, Emma replied. Detective Hayes outlined the details of her investigation. She had uncovered evidence that Ethan had been involved in several illicit financial transactions, all designed to hide the true extent of his wealth. It seemed that Ethan had been living a double life, one of public success and private corruption. We can't go public with this just yet, Detective Hayes warned. But if you can gather more documentation and keep me in the loop, we'll have the evidence we need to bring him down for good. Emma's heart raced with excitement. For years, she had been a passive player in Ethan's world, but now, she was being offered a chance to flip the script. This was more than just a personal vendetta. This was about exposing Ethan for the fraud he truly was, and ensuring that no one else would fall victim to his manipulation. Thank you, Emma said, her voice steady with determination. I'll do whatever it takes. After the call ended, Emma took a deep breath. The stakes had just been raised. She had a new ally, one who was as determined as she was to see Ethan held accountable for his actions. But even as she felt the rush of power and control, Emma knew the risks involved. Ethan would stop at nothing to protect himself, and if he discovered that she was working with the police, the consequences could be disastrous. She would have to be careful, methodical, in how she gathered the evidence needed to expose him. As she sat at her desk, Emma reflected on how far she had come. She had fought for her freedom, rebuilt her life, and now, she had the tools to take down the man who had once held all the power. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for justice, for every woman who had been silenced, for every person who had been taken advantage of by men like Ethan. The next day, Emma met with Detective Hayes in a discreet location. They exchanged information, and Emma handed over some financial records that she had kept hidden away. She had learned to be cautious, to keep a close eye on every transaction, every move Ethan made. "This is just the beginning," Detective Hayes said, looking over the papers. "But with this, we have a solid foundation. I'll keep you updated on what we find." "Thank you," Emma said, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I won't let him get away with it." Later that afternoon, Emma received a text from Ryan, asking to meet up. The connection they shared had grown deeper in recent weeks, and despite the chaos of her life, Emma found solace in his presence. They met at a small park, the crisp autumn air adding a sense of tranquility to the moment. Ryan smiled as she approached, his eyes warm and welcoming. "You're looking better," he said, taking her hand. "How's everything going?" Emma hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's going well. The legal battle is still ongoing, but I'm making progress. I found some new leverage." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Leverage? What do you mean?" Emma smiled faintly, knowing she couldn't share all the details just yet. "Let's just say, Ethan isn't the man he claims to be. I have something that could bring him down for good." Ryan's expression shifted, his concern evident. "Be careful, Emma. Ethan is dangerous, and he'll do anything to protect himself." "I know," Emma said, squeezing his hand. "But I'm ready. I'm not backing down now." As they walked through the park, talking about their past and future, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. For the first time in years, she was taking control of her life, and she wasn't alone. Ryan, Sophia, and now Detective Hayes were all standing by her side. The battle with Ethan was far from over, but Emma knew one thing for certain: she would win. The tipping point. As the weeks stretched on, Emma's resolve only strengthened. The legal battle was fierce, and Ethan's attacks continued, but each new challenge only served to fuel her determination. With Detective Hayes feeding her crucial information, she was slowly building a case that would bring Ethan down, not just for his mistreatment of her, but for his criminal activities that had been hidden beneath the surface for years. The quiet hours spent poring over documents in her office became routine. Every evening, after a long day of business meetings, Emma met with Sophia to go over the strategy. They discussed the latest developments, and each time, Emma's confidence grew. She knew they were getting closer to the moment when everything would change. One afternoon, as Emma was leaving her office, Clara handed her a letter marked with a familiar seal, Ethan's legal team. A knot tightened in her stomach as she opened it, dreading what might be inside. The letter was a final attempt to force her into a settlement. It was aggressive, threatening, and laced with personal attacks. But what stood out was the demand for a public apology. Ethan wanted her to admit she had made a mistake in filing for divorce, to apologize for the slander he claimed she had inflicted on his reputation. Emma's hands trembled as she read the letter. The audacity of it all, the arrogance that Ethan still believed he had the power to dictate her life. He thought he could force her into submission, make her bow down to him once again. She crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash, her decision clear. There would be no backing down, no surrender. Ethan would never have the satisfaction of seeing her grovel. She would fight him to the very end. That night, Emma sat at her kitchen table with the financial documents spread out before her. She had a meeting with Detective Hayes the following day, and she needed to be prepared. The investigation was nearing its climax. Hayes had found substantial evidence linking Ethan to several shady business deals and money laundering operations. The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place, and soon, they would have the leverage they needed to force Ethan into a corner. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Ryan. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier. I want to help. I know this is a huge battle, but you don't have to face it alone." Emma smiled softly at his words, feeling the weight of his support. He had always been there for her, and now, more than ever, she needed him by her side. As they prepared for the final showdown, Emma's thoughts often wandered back to their growing connection. Ryan had become more than just a friend. He was a pillar of strength, a reminder that she was capable of so much more than she had ever realized. She had spent too long relying on Ethan's approval, but now she had Ryan's steady presence and unwavering belief in her. The next day, she met with Detective Hayes at a cafe in the city center. Hayes was her usual composed self, but today, there was an air of anticipation. "We've got it," Hayes said, sliding a folder across the table. "I've secured the final piece of evidence. Ethan's operations go much deeper than we thought. It's only a matter of time before we take him down." Emma's heart raced as she opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, contracts, and emails detailing Ethan's involvement in illegal activities. It was all there, the proof that would expose him for the fraud he truly was. The realization hit her like a wave. Ethan's empire wasn't built on hard work or success. It was built on deception and manipulation. "Are you ready?" Hayes asked, her voice steady but filled with urgency. Emma closed the folder, her face set with determination. "I've been ready for this moment for a long time." Later that afternoon, Emma sat down with her lawyer, preparing for the final court appearance. They went over the strategy one last time, making sure every detail was in place. Emma was more prepared than she had ever been, and she knew that this was the turning point, the moment when everything would shift. The day of the hearing arrived, and Emma entered the courtroom with a calm confidence. Ethan, as always, sat in the front row, his smug expression still firmly in place. He had no idea that the walls were closing in around him. As the proceedings began, Emma's lawyer presented the evidence of Ethan's illegal activities, documents that had been carefully curated, each piece meticulously connected. The courtroom was stunned as they learned of the depths of Ethan's corruption. Ethan's lawyer attempted to counter, but it was too late. The truth was out. Emma stood in the witness box, her eyes meeting Ethan's for the first time in what felt like forever. His expression was no longer one of superiority, but of desperation. He knew he had lost. "How does it feel, Ethan?" Emma's voice was steady, but there was an edge of triumph in her words. "To know that everything you've built, all the lies and manipulation, have come crashing down." Ethan's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. He knew that there was nothing left to say. The weight of the truth had finally caught up with him. As the judge called for a brief recess, Emma's thoughts turned to the future. She had won, not just in court, but in life. Ethan no longer had any hold over her. She was free, truly free, and the world ahead of her was full of possibilities. That night, as she sat with Ryan at her favorite park, Emma felt a deep sense of peace. The battle had been long and hard, but she had fought with everything she had. And now, as she looked at the stars above, she knew that this was only the beginning of the next chapter in her life. The fall of the empire. The courtroom had been silent after the recess, but the air felt electric. The reality of what was happening, the downfall of Ethan Carter, began to settle in. Emma stood in the witness box, her heart pounding with a mixture of triumph and disbelief. The pieces of Ethan's carefully constructed empire were collapsing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it now. Her lawyer, Sophia, had presented the evidence with precision. Documents detailing Ethan's fraudulent activities, bank transfers linked to offshore accounts, and emails implicating him in a series of illegal transactions. Every bit of information painted a picture of a man who had built his fortune not on hard work, but on lies, manipulation, and crime. Emma could see Ethan's face twist in anger as he sat in the front row, but there was a flicker of fear in his eyes, a fear he had never shown before. For the first time, he realized that his power over her had vanished, and he had no control over the situation. As the judge continued to review the evidence, Emma stood tall. Her hands were steady as she held her ground, not for a moment allowing herself to falter. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when Ethan would finally pay for everything he had done to her and countless others. The judge called for the final arguments, and Emma took a seat beside her lawyer, her mind already racing through the next steps. But before the court could reach a verdict, Ethan's lawyer stood up, interrupting the proceedings. "We request a settlement," the lawyer said quickly, his voice laced with desperation. "This matter can be resolved outside of court. We are willing to offer a significant sum to avoid further legal action." Emma's blood boiled at the audacity of the suggestion. She had worked so hard to get here, to expose Ethan for the fraud he was, and now he wanted to buy his way out. The arrogance was staggering. Sophia, always calm under pressure, stood up to address the court. "The time for settlement has passed. This case is about justice, not money. We are not here to negotiate with a man who has spent years hiding behind his wealth and deceit." The judge nodded in agreement. "I've heard enough. We will proceed with the verdict." Emma could hardly contain her emotions as the judge deliberated. She had fought for this moment for so long, and now it was within reach. She had stood up for herself when she had nothing, and now, with the truth on her side, she would finally see justice done. The judge returned with the ruling. "Ethan Carter, you are found guilty of multiple counts of financial fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. Your assets are to be seized, and you will face criminal charges. The court also orders the immediate dissolution of your marriage to Emma Carter, with a full division of assets and a permanent injunction against any further attempts to interfere in her life. The weight of the verdict hit Ethan like a tidal wave. His arrogance shattered completely as he sat there, stunned into silence. Emma didn't look at him. She had no need to. This was her victory, and it had been a long time coming. Sophia turned to Emma with a smile, her eyes gleaming with pride. "You did it. It's over." Emma nodded, but inside, she felt a mix of relief and sadness. The battle had been brutal, and while she had won, it didn't erase the years of emotional turmoil that Ethan had put her through. Still, she knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where she was finally in control of her life. Later that evening, as Emma walked out of the courthouse, she was greeted by Ryan, who had been waiting outside. He took one look at her face and knew the verdict had come through. "You did it," Ryan said, pulling her into a warm hug. Emma hugged him back, feeling the weight of the day lift as she realized that she no longer had to carry the burden of her past. Ethan had been defeated, and she was free. "I did," Emma replied, her voice filled with emotion. "But it wasn't just me. I couldn't have done it without you, Sophia, and everyone who believed in me." Ryan smiled softly, his hand gently brushing her cheek. "You're stronger than you realize. You fought for yourself, and now you can live the life you deserve." The two of them walked away from the courthouse together, the city's lights glowing brightly in the distance. Emma felt a renewed sense of hope, knowing that her journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. For so long, she had been bound by the chains of her past, but now she was free. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up, and with the support of those who cared for her, she would continue to build the life she had always dreamed of. A new beginning. The days following the court ruling were a blur of emotions for Emma. There was a sense of relief, yes, but also a deep sadness for the years lost to a marriage that had been built on lies and manipulation. Yet, as she moved through the motions of setting up her new life, changing the locks on her apartment, meeting with her financial advisors, and starting the process of severing every remaining connection to Ethan, Emma found herself more focused than ever. The past was behind her, and the future was now wide open. She threw herself into her work, making the final adjustments to her businesses. With Ethan's empire crumbling, there was a new void in the market that she knew she could fill. Emma was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. Her confidence grew daily as she made bold decisions and took risks that she had never before dared to consider. One evening, after a particularly productive day in the office, Emma received a call from Sophia. "How are you holding up?" Sophia asked, her voice warm and comforting. "I'm doing well, actually," Emma replied, a smile creeping onto her face. "Everything's moving forward. My businesses are doing better than ever, and I'm finally starting to feel like I can breathe again." Sophia chuckled. "I knew you had it in you. You've always had the strength. You just needed to see it for yourself." Emma paused, considering her words carefully. "I don't know if I would have been able to do it without you. You've been a lifeline through all of this." "That's what friends are for," Sophia replied, her voice filled with affection. "But you did all the hard work. I'm just glad I could be there to help you see it through." Emma sat back in her chair, gazing out of the window at the city below. It was still a little surreal, this new reality she had built for herself. She was in control now, of her businesses, of her life, and most importantly, of her future. As the call ended, Emma's phone buzzed. It was a message from Ryan. She smiled and opened it. "How about a celebration dinner tonight? I think we both deserve it." Without hesitation, Emma replied, "I'd love that." Later that evening, they met at a quiet restaurant overlooking the water. The gentle hum of conversation filled the air, but Emma barely heard it. All she could focus on was Ryan, his reassuring presence, the warmth in his eyes as he looked at her. "You know, I never thought I'd see the day when you'd be rid of him," Ryan said, his voice light, though his eyes were serious. "I always knew you were stronger than you realized, but watching you tear his world down like that, it was incredible." Emma's heart swelled at his words. "It wasn't just about tearing his world down," she said, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "It was about taking back control of mine. I've been waiting for so long to be free of him, and now, I finally am." Ryan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You are free, and you deserve all the happiness in the world." For a moment, they sat in silence, enjoying each other's company. It was a rare kind of peace, one Emma had longed for but never thought she would find. Later that evening, after dinner, Ryan took her for a walk by the water. The air was cool, and the moonlight reflected off the surface of the water, creating a soft glow around them. "You know," Ryan said, breaking the silence, "you've been through so much. But you've come out of it stronger, more determined." "It's inspiring, Emma." Emma smiled up at him. "I've learned that strength doesn't always come from what we've been through. Sometimes it's about what we choose to do next. And right now, I'm choosing to live for myself, for the first time in a long time." They walked together in comfortable silence for a while before Ryan stopped, turning to face her. "I know you've been through a lot with Ethan, but I want you to know I'm here for you. Whatever comes next, you don't have to face it alone." Emma's heart fluttered at his words. There was something more than just friendship between them, something that had been growing quietly over the past few weeks. Ryan had always been there for her, but now, she realized, he had become more than a friend. He was her ally, her anchor. And in a world that had been so uncertain, his presence was a comfort. She looked into his eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not alone anymore." Ryan's smile widened as he took her hand and led her down the path by the water. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt like everything was falling into place. The final confrontation. As Emma's life began to fall into a rhythm, the weight of her past slowly faded into the background. The businesses she had fought so hard to build were thriving, and her relationship with Ryan continued to grow deeper. He was her constant, a person who accepted her for who she was, without the layers of expectation that had once defined her relationship with Ethan. However, despite the calm that now enveloped Emma's life, she knew the battle wasn't over. Ethan was still out there, and even though he had lost everything in court, his pride and hunger for power were not so easily defeated. He was a man who believed he could control everything and everyone around him, and Emma knew that he wouldn't accept his fall from grace quietly. One afternoon, while Emma was going over new investment strategies with her team, she received a call from Sophia. There was an edge to her voice that immediately caught Emma's attention. "Emma, we've got a problem," Sophia said. "Ethan's been trying to move assets around. He's been using his remaining connections to make threats, and we believe he's planning something. He's not going to let this go." Emma's pulse quickened. She had expected something like this. Ethan wasn't the type to fade into the background, especially not after the humiliating public defeat he had suffered. "Is he trying to get to me directly?" Emma asked, her voice calm but focused. "He's trying to leverage the remaining parts of his empire. He's made some calls to investors, even trying to get back into the market. But the real threat is how he's using his old connections to go after you, Emma," Sophia explained. "You need to be careful. This could get messy." Emma's mind raced. She had fought so long and hard to be free of Ethan, and now he was trying to crawl back into her life. But this time, she was ready. "Thank you for letting me know. I won't let him get away with it." After hanging up, Emma knew she had to take control once more. Ethan wasn't going to slink away into the shadows, and she wouldn't allow him to cause any more damage. She immediately called Ryan, needing his support more than ever. They met that evening, and Emma explained what Sophia had told her. Ryan listened carefully, his expression serious as he took in the full scope of the situation. "You've already beaten him in the court of law," Ryan said. "But you're right. He's not going to stop just because of a court ruling. He wants to regain what he lost, and that means making you a target again." Emma nodded. "I've spent too long hiding from him. I can't let him do this again. I need to make sure he understands once and for all that I'm not afraid of him." Ryan's hand gently squeezed hers. "And you won't face this alone. You've already done the hardest part. Now it's time to finish this once and for all." The next day, Emma reached out to her team of legal advisors and private investigators. Together, they began tracking Ethan's movements and his financial activities. They were meticulous, gathering every shred of evidence that would prove that Ethan was still trying to manipulate people and reclaim his power. Emma wasn't going to let him rebuild his empire on the back of deceit. The investigation quickly uncovered something unsettling. Ethan had been attempting to forge partnerships with shady businesses, using his remaining wealth to secure illegal deals. He was trying to buy his way back into the market, using every trick in the book to avoid paying the price for his actions. "Looks like he's trying to make a comeback," Sophia said, showing Emma the latest findings. "But this time, he's not going to be able to slip through the cracks. We've got him now." But Ethan's desperation was only growing. The next time Emma saw him wasn't in the courtroom. It was at a public event, a high-profile gala that Ethan was attending in an attempt to rebuild his social standing. Emma had no intention of letting him think for a second that he could re-enter the circles he once controlled. She arrived at the event with Ryan by her side, confident and composed. She didn't hesitate as she walked straight up to Ethan, who was conversing with a group of business associates. The moment he saw her, his face contorted into a mixture of shock and anger. "Emma," he said, his voice laced with bitterness. "I should have known you'd show up here." Emma stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not here to engage in some power struggle, Ethan," she said coldly. "I'm here to make one thing clear. You are done. There is no coming back. You've burned every bridge, and now it's time to face the consequences." Ethan sneered, his eyes dark with rage. "You think you've won? You're nothing without me. You think people will respect you now? They'll turn on you eventually." Emma stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. "I don't need anyone's respect but my own. You've spent your life trying to tear people down, Ethan. But not anymore. I'm done letting you control me, and I'm done playing your game." The room had gone silent, and people were beginning to watch the confrontation unfold. Emma knew this was the moment when Ethan's world would finally crumble. He had been living in a fantasy, thinking he could reclaim what he had lost. But she was the one who had taken back control of her life, and now she was finishing what she had started. "You are finished," Emma continued, her voice now louder, commanding the attention of everyone around them. "And I will make sure you never harm anyone again." Ethan's face reddened, but he knew he had no comeback. The people in the room were no longer on his side. They were watching the downfall of a man who had lost everything. With one final glance at Ethan, Emma turned and walked away, Ryan by her side. She had said everything she needed to say, and she had made sure Ethan knew that his reign of terror was over. As they left the event, Emma felt a wave of finality wash over her. The battle was truly over, and she had won. Ethan's empire, built on lies and manipulation, was nothing but a memory now. But Emma had something far more valuable: her freedom, her integrity, and the future she was now free to build. Reclaiming her future. The days after the gala were filled with a sense of finality and calm. Ethan, now fully exposed, had no way of escaping the consequences of his actions. His financial empire was in shambles, and his reputation lay in ruins. Emma, on the other hand, was free. Free from his control, free from the lies, and free to finally live the life she had always imagined for herself. The pressure that had once weighed on her shoulders had dissipated, and for the first time in years, Emma was able to breathe deeply without the constant anxiety of what Ethan might do next. She immersed herself fully in her businesses, expanding further into new ventures and making decisions that would ensure her future success. The satisfaction of knowing that she was building something real and sustainable gave her a sense of purpose she had never had before. Sophia remained a close ally, offering legal counsel whenever necessary, but Emma no longer needed to worry about Ethan's interference. The trust between them was unshakable, and they had become more like family than just friends. Emma had grown comfortable with her independence, but having Sophia by her side made her realize the importance of having people who truly cared for her. But it wasn't just her professional life that was flourishing. As her bond with Ryan deepened, Emma found herself opening up in ways she had never allowed herself to before. He was patient and understanding, a steady presence in her life. Where Ethan had once demanded her attention with selfishness, Ryan offered his with care and respect. Their relationship grew stronger with each passing day, built on mutual trust and understanding. One evening, after a long day at the office, Emma found herself sitting on the couch in her apartment, a glass of wine in hand, when Ryan came over for dinner. They shared a quiet meal, the warmth of their connection filling the space. "I've been thinking," Ryan began, looking at her with a thoughtful expression. "You've done everything on your own, Emma. You've built your business, you've rebuilt your life after everything Ethan put you through. But, have you thought about what comes next?" Emma raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Ryan smiled gently. "I mean, now that everything is in place, now that you've reclaimed your life, what do you want for the future? What's your dream, Emma? Not the one that's shaped by everything that's happened, but the one that's truly yours." Emma sat back, her mind drifting to the possibilities. She had spent so much time fighting for freedom, for independence, that she hadn't given herself the space to dream beyond survival. Now, with the weight of the past finally lifted, she could imagine a life without limitations. "I think," Emma began slowly, "I want to expand the businesses further, but more than that, I want to use my platform to help other women. Women who've been in the same place I was. I want to give them the tools to break free, to build their own lives, just like I did." Ryan's eyes softened as he listened. "That sounds incredible. You've already shown so much strength. I have no doubt you can make it happen. Emma smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. I'm not doing it alone, Ryan. I have you by my side, and I'll have others who believe in this too. The days that followed were filled with new plans and exciting projects. Emma hired more staff, brought on new investors, and began brainstorming ways to mentor women who had been in abusive relationships or oppressive situations. She envisioned creating workshops, online courses, and support networks, tools that could empower others to take control of their lives, just as she had. Her personal life continued to blossom as well. Ryan had become not only a partner in her business endeavors, but also in her life. They traveled together, exploring places they had both dreamed of visiting, and every day seemed like a new adventure. There was an ease to their connection, a feeling of completeness that Emma hadn't experienced before. As the months went by, Emma's reputation as a successful entrepreneur grew. People recognized her not just for her financial acumen, but for her story. The woman who had overcome the odds, who had reclaimed her life and her power. Emma was no longer the woman defined by Ethan. She was Emma Carter, a force to be reckoned with, someone who had built her own future from the ground up. One sunny afternoon, while Emma sat in her office reviewing plans for the upcoming women's summit she was organizing, Clara came in with a package. It was from an unfamiliar address, and Emma's curiosity piqued. She opened it to find a small, ornate box inside. When she lifted the lid, a delicate necklace lay nestled in the velvet lining. Attached to the necklace was a note, written in a familiar handwriting. You were always stronger than you knew. This is for the woman you've become. It was from her late Aunt Margaret, the woman whose inheritance had unknowingly set her on the path of independence. Emma felt a tear slip down her cheek as she held the necklace, the weight of her aunt's belief in her more meaningful than ever. Margaret had seen something in her long before Emma had realized it herself. As she put on the necklace, Emma reflected on how far she had come. She had once been trapped, suffocated by a life that wasn't her own, but now she was free. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up and, in doing so, had found the courage to dream bigger than ever before. It was no longer about escaping the past. It was about creating the future she deserved. And with Ryan by her side, and a world of possibilities ahead, Emma knew that nothing was impossible. Embracing the future. Emma stood on the stage, the soft hum of the audience's voices buzzing in the background. The room was filled with women from all walks of life, entrepreneurs, professionals, mothers, students, each one with their own story of struggle and resilience. Today, they were here to hear Emma speak at the first annual Women's Empowerment Summit, an event she had spent months planning. She adjusted the microphone, feeling the weight of the moment. This was more than just a speech. This was the culmination of everything she had worked for. This was her way of giving back, of sharing the lessons she had learned through the darkest days of her life. The lights dimmed, and Emma took a deep breath before walking forward, her heart racing with anticipation. Good afternoon, everyone, she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I'm so honored to be here today, standing before you all. I see so many faces in this room. Faces of women who are here not just to learn, but to share, to support, and to empower each other. She paused for a moment, letting the words settle. I've been where many of you are, feeling trapped, afraid, and unsure of what comes next. But I want you to know something. You are not alone. I was once silenced by fear, by doubt, by a man who tried to control my life. But I realized, as I stand here today, that our strength lies in our ability to break free, to rise above our circumstances, and to reclaim the future that's ours. The audience was silent, their eyes fixed on her, hanging on every word. Emma's words were no longer just a reflection of her journey. They were a call to action. She was speaking not just for herself, but for every woman who had ever felt powerless. I spent years feeling like I had no control, like I was defined by someone else's narrative. But the moment I took ownership of my life was the moment everything changed. I walked away from a life that no longer served me. I fought for my freedom, for my dignity, and for the life I knew I was capable of building. And that fight was not just for me. It was for every woman who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she spoke. She hadn't expected the emotion to rush over her, but it was real and raw. She had fought for her future, but more importantly, she had learned that the strength to live authentically came from within. She looked out into the crowd, her gaze meeting the eyes of the women who had come to hear her story. This isn't just my story. This is our story. It's the story of every woman who has chosen to rise above the struggles, to take control of her narrative, and to show the world what she's truly capable of. You have that power. It's inside you right now, waiting to be unleashed. The crowd erupted into applause, the sound filling the room like a wave of empowerment. Emma felt her heart swell as she took a moment to breathe, to absorb the enormity of the moment. She wasn't just speaking to an audience, she was part of a movement, a sisterhood of women who understood the value of reclaiming their lives and their futures. As the applause died down, Emma smiled, her eyes scanning the room. She had come full circle. The woman who had once been broken was now the woman standing at the forefront of something greater than herself. She had built her empire, found her voice, and most importantly, she had found her purpose. The event continued with other powerful speakers, but Emma's mind was already racing ahead. This was just the beginning. There was so much more to be done, so many more lives to touch, and so many more women to empower. She had a responsibility now, a responsibility to continue leading the charge for those who needed it most. That evening, as the summit came to a close, Ryan joined Emma backstage. He looked at her with admiration, his eyes soft with pride. "You were amazing," he said, his voice full of warmth. "You've inspired so many people today." Emma smiled, feeling a rush of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Ryan. You've been by my side through all of this. I wouldn't be here without you." Ryan pulled her into a gentle embrace. "You've always had it in you, Emma. You just needed to see it." As they stood there, in that quiet moment, Emma felt the weight of her journey, both the pain and the triumph, finally settle into place. She had faced the storm, and now she was living the life she had always dreamed of. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt whole. She had fought for her freedom, for her future, and she had won. And now, the road ahead was hers to shape, with no one else's expectations but her own. She pulled away from Ryan and looked out at the skyline through the windows. The city stretched before her, full of possibilities. She had reclaimed her future, and she was ready to continue building it, on her terms, for herself, and for every woman who would follow in her footsteps. The future was bright, and Emma was ready to embrace it fully.